Okay, good evening, gentlemen. Nice to know that Torah doesn't take a break on bank holidays. We used to have it was funny, there used to be a yeshiva that used to have trips on Tuesdays, and everybody used to laugh about it. It was called No Torah Tuesdays. Yeah, so we're not having No Torah Tuesdays here in Shrubs today. Okay, I'd like to start with the following idea. Hey, Sammy. And that's, at the end of the Parasha, last week's Sedra, you will find that, or if you look in the Torah, if you have something that's, if you have a Sefer Torah, a Tikkun Korim, you will find that in general, you will see that there is a space between each Parasha and the next Parasha. You finish one Parasha, there'll be something called a Parasha Psucha or a Parasha Stuma. A Parasha Psucha means that you actually have a new paragraph. So wherever the line finishes, it finishes. You go to the next line, you start again from the next line. That's called a Parasha Psucha, an open Parasha. A Parasha Stuma has a short break, about 9 letters worth that you find in there, and that is what you'll have as a Parasha Stuma. That's what it's, and usually before every single Parasha, you will find that. Laura says I should make sure you stay awake. Thank you, Laura. Thank you. I've passed that on to Michael.
Thank you, Laura.
He says thank you as well. He's heard it. He's still awake. We've just started. He's still awake. The comment needs to come again in about 20 minutes. Right? So, do you know what?
She's just checking where I am.
It's very funny. I'll tell you, I was giving a shir. Yesterday, and it's one of the first times that's happened to me. It doesn't happen so often when you give a shir that people fall asleep. That happens quite often. You know, you speak and people fall asleep. You know, it is what it is. But there was this fellow that was sitting there, and suddenly he's like watching, and you watch his head bobbing and bobbing and bobbing. And then he started snoring. And as he started snoring, it was brilliant because people started shoving him, like, you know, and you got this. I'm with you. Yeah, it was just fantastic. I love it, you know, to just watch them fall asleep. It's not funny to watch them fall asleep. On the other hand, the snoring, I just couldn't help but smile at it. So you have the Torah, and every single Parasha starts off at a specific point. The only Parasha where you will struggle to find the beginning in the Torah is Parashas Vayechi. There's actually only 1 letter distance between the end of last week's Sedra and the beginning of this week's Sedra. And the question is why? Why is there not a bigger distance between one and the other? And Rashi already points out over here, but there are others that point out the different things. Rashi says 2 things. Number 1, why is this Parasha a closed Parasha? Says Rashi, reason number 1, that when Yaakov Avinu passed away, the eyes and the hearts of the Jewish people became shut with the fact that they now had to work for the Egyptians. And then Rashi says another answer, and this is what I wanted to focus on. One of the answers, and come back to Rav Shamshon Hirsch. Rashi says another reason. Shebikesh legalas as haketz. Yaakov Avinu wanted to tell the Jewish people when the Golus will end. V'nistam mimenu, and it became hidden from him. God did not want him to tell the Jewish people when the Golus would end. Right? Now, it's interesting. Why would God not want them to know when the Golus would end? It's actually an interesting discussion in and of itself. What does that mean? Does it mean that he didn't want them to know that the Golus will end, the Golus of Egypt, when the Egyptian exile will end? Or does that mean he wouldn't want them to know when the general exile will end, when everything will end? So let's work with the Golus of Egypt. Even though people say, well, God already told him. He said to Avram Avinu, you should know that your children will be enslaved for 400 years, right? So we know already that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Avraham Avinu how long the Jews were enslaved for. However, I would like to say something important about this, and that's the following. When it comes to discussing when the Golus ends, and that's part of the reason why we don't have a date put on this, what do we say in the Ani Ma'amins? If you say the Ani Ma'amins every day, Ani Ma'amin b'munah shalema, I believe with great faith, B'vias HaMashiach, that Mashiach could come, And then we say, Ve'ava mishi ismamea. We don't say this by only any of the other ones. But here we say, even though the Mashiach has taken his time, Im kozeh, with all that, I will wait for him. B'chol yom sheyaveh, any day that he might come, I am waiting. I know he's going to come, it's just a question of when. But imagine if we knew. Can I ask you a question? What would be the reaction of the Jewish people if we knew when Mashiach would come?
Stop packing up.
We'll start packing up. Well, it depends when, right? If I said to you now, Alan, I know Mashiach is coming in 2050, what would you say? Oh, I don't even know if I'll be there. You know what I mean? You know, I hope to be there, but I don't know if I'll be there. I don't have to work on myself. I know exactly when Mashiach is coming. There's nothing to work for. There's nothing to hope for. If I gave you an exact date, it's like an example that I've given in the past. I remember I used to teach. Well, I still do, but I used to teach somebody in PBM who's now stopped coming, and there were sometimes matches on the same night. He was a Manchester City fan and used to want to wait till he got home to watch the match. And we used to always joke with him. It was Howard Gruber. We used to always joke with him, Howard, your team's losing 2-1. Quiet. Your team's losing 2. I don't want to know. I don't want to hear. Right? We used to make it up anyway. You know, when maybe the team was winning, the team was losing, it didn't make a difference. We just made it up as we went along. But why do we do that? Or why did he not want to know? Why would somebody not want to know what the score is?
Well, the enjoyment.
Well, that takes away the entire enjoyment of the whole thing, right? If you knew what the score is, for example, I remember people telling me that they went to watch that final game in 2000, I think it was either 11 or 12, when Manchester City was playing QPR. Was that 11 or 12, Michael? Can't remember the year, but you know when they won the championship. And they were down. And they were down 2-1 to a 10-man QPR team. And everyone's like, this is Manchester City. They're going to throw it away against one of the worst teams in the league, a 10-man team, and they're down 2-1, and they're just running it down. It's now the 80th minute, the 85th minute. I'm sure if you had a bet now on the 88th minute, that Manchester City would have won the trophy, you would have gotten some pretty good odds on that one. Yeah? People say, what are the chances? That's not going to happen. But yet, they scored a goal in the 90th or in the 91st, and they scored another goal in the 92nd minute, and they won the league. Now, had I told you at the onset of the game that this game is going to be won by Manchester City, I've watched the game to the end. I'm telling you, Manchester City is going to win. The entire excitement of the entire game would have gone away, right? The whole excitement, I mean, somebody said to me, he says, I was sitting next to my son who had his face buried in his hands in the 70th minute and saying to himself, we worked so hard. I mean, how many years was it before 2011? I think it was about 40 years last time they had won the season. And they were so close. They were just so close. And it was such an easy team. And all they had to do was win a simple game against one of the worst teams in the league. And they had worked their way up. And he was sitting there and he was crying. He was sobbing in his hands. This is what's going on. How are we throwing this away? This is so typical Manchester City to do that. Yeah, that's what people were telling me. I didn't say this. I don't know what's typical and what's not typical. But people were saying, yeah, it's typical Manchester City to throw it away like that, just in the last second. And then to win it, I mean, he said the tears of joy, the tears of sadness, etc. But if you had walked in and I said to you, look, what's going to happen is they're going to be down 2-1 until the 90th minute. They're going to score a goal in the 90th. They're going to score a goal in the 91st minute. That's what's going to happen. Oh, all right. You wouldn't sit there in the 80th minute worrying. You'd say, I know it's 2-1, but it doesn't make a difference. I know we're going to win. I know for sure we're going to win because the rabbi's seen the game to the end and he knows that we're going to win. Yeah? So the entire excitement of everything goes away. And any work that you do for it will go away also. And it's the same thing that's true as well for the Golus. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us when the Golus ended, if Hashem said the Golus ends on such and such a date, would the Jewish people work to bring an end to the Golus? Would the Jewish people work to create achdus, unity amongst each other? We'd say, who cares? God gave us a date. That's the date, whether we like it or not. No matter what we do, God's going to let us out of Egypt anyway. Who cares? Yeah, the whole thing becomes almost unnecessary to discuss. It becomes something so therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I don't want the Jewish people knowing when the Mashiach comes. Because number one, it means that they won't work for the Mashiach to come. They won't hope for the Mashiach to come. There's no hope. There's none of the drama is part of it, because you say, I know exactly when it's coming. It's coming on the 21st of June, 2015. There we go. I've told you. Yeah? No, please don't believe that that's the date. Yeah. Yeah. You heard it here first, right? That's not what it is. Yeah, but if you knew exactly what date it was coming, it would be totally uninteresting. It would be uninteresting when Mashiach would come, because you'd say, either I'll survive it or I won't survive it. But I don't have to work hard to bring Mashiach. I don't have to work hard, or we as a Jewish people collectively don't have to work hard to bring Mashiach, because God's told us already when it's brought. Okay, that's what it is. That's when it is. That's number one. But on top of that, another thing which is really important, let's go back to the amount of years that Avraham Avinu was told. How many years was Avraham Avinu told that his children will be exiled? How many years, Shmuley? 400. Thank you. How many years do we know they were in Egypt? 210. How many of those were they actually enslaved? A lot less. I think like 60 or 70, somewhere between 60 and 70 years. So the whole cheshbon, the whole calculation doesn't need to make any sense. What do you mean? You said 400, then it's 210. It's not really 210. So what is it? So what turns out over here, and this is important to say as well, is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we say thank you to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu chishev es hakates. That's what we say in the Haggadah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu figured out the kates, the ending. Hashem said, look, I'll make sure that the ending works out. When is it going to happen? Don't you worry, I'm good at mathematics. I'll make it work. So you say, what about the 400 years? HaKadosh Baruch Hu said 400 years. Yeah, you know what? It's 400 years from when Yitzchak was born. You work it out. And if it would have been a year later, HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have worked out 400 years from something else. Don't worry about God and his mathematics and his calculations. God will work things out. God will work things out that will work out anyway. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm not going to tell you when the kates is. I'm not going to tell you when the ending will come, because the ending can come any day. With Mashiach, sometimes there's a Gemara that says somebody found Mashiach in the marketplace. And he said to him, when's Mashiach coming? He says, today. Today? Well, it didn't come then. Yeah, but it did have the potential to come then. It has potential to come any day. And therefore, Kodesh Baruch Hu says, I'm not giving you a date. It doesn't make sense to give you a date, because a date puts a definitive timeline on it. And God says, I'm not putting a definitive timeline on it. If you guys do the right thing, you get out of there earlier. But so you'll tell me, but what about the 400 years and 210 years? God says, don't worry about the maths. Let me worry about the maths. Let me worry about the prophecies. You just worry about doing the best thing that you can. And therefore, God doesn't want to give them a specific date. But Rav Hirsch has a very beautiful idea over here as well, which I thought was it was interesting. Because he says basically the following. If you look at Yaakov, I spoke about this yesterday, I was at a Shiva house. If you think about Yaakov, let's look at Yaakov as a person throughout his entire life. When were Yaakov's best years of his life, would you say?
First 17, the last 17.
First 17 or the last 17? Why would you say the first 17? Definitely the last 17. That's definitely right, Elliot. The last 17 is definitely right. The first. I think
Joseph.
Right. I think of Joseph. Yeah, now I'm talking about Yaakov. Joseph is the first 17. That's true. But even Joseph, the first 17, he always had the discussion with his brothers. He wasn't so popular. But Yaakov, he was born. He always had an Esav to contend with, and then he had to run away. And he was by Lavan. And after running away from Lavan, he came back and he had to contend with Esav. And after contending with Esav, his son was taken away from him. And then for 22 years, he didn't have a son. And finally, he makes it down to Egypt, and they settle down, and everything is just hunky-dory. And for the last 17 years of his life, Yaakov lives blissfully. When we say Vayechi Yaakov and Yaakov lived, it means this is the best time of Yaakov's life. Not always is it like that, but there are people for whom retirement is like, that's the ultimate. Some people, retirement is an absolute curse, and for some people, retirement is absolute pleasure. They retire, they've saved up enough money to be able to live on the money that they've worked for, they have a good pension, they have nachas from the children. They can now go traveling, visit one grandchild, another grandchild, from simcha to simcha. They're living carefree. It is brilliant. For some people, retirement is terrible. They're bored. They have nothing to do. Sometimes their children don't give them wonderful nachas either. One child is sitting in jail, and one child, you know, who knows? You know, there are people, sadly, with everything that they've worked for, they might have enough money, but they don't have any nachas. Or they might have lots of nachas, but they don't have the money to be able to travel around, to be able to shep that nachas, to get any pleasure from it. Because their daughter lives halfway across the ocean, not halfway across the ocean, probably all the way. Nobody lives halfway across the ocean. Halfway across the world. In America, and they have another child that lives in Australia, one that lives in Eretz Yisrael, and they just can't afford to be jet-setting all the time. So once a year, they make a trip to somebody, and they get nachas. But the rest of the time, they're just sitting here saying, "It doesn't want to retire."
Or they may have everything and just have the wrong attitude.
They might do. And that's the worst. Because if you have everything and you have the worst, you know, that, because things sometimes can change. You know, you might not have nachas, but you can change your attitude and you have nachas. You might not have, or you might not have nachas, or you might have nachas and you learn how to take. But if you have everything and you just have a bad attitude, then how are you ever going to get anything? What's going to change now? That's a hard one. Absolutely, Roger. Well, you know, spot on. So Yaakov's now got his life in order. He's got his children. He's got his grandchildren. He's got Yosef, who's taking care of him financially. He's living in Egypt. Everybody lives around him. They don't have to work. They're learning Torah, and he's just in great spirits. Yaakov is really doing well. And we'd say this is the most amazing, greatest time in Yaakov Avinu's life. That's what it would seem. Says Rav Hirsch, yes. If you look at Yaakov personally, if you want to look at Yaakov as an individual, you will say this is maybe the greatest time in Yaakov's life. But if you want to look at the Jewish people, if you want to have a broader view, don't just look at the man himself. Look at the nation. What did he achieve in the first 130 years of his life before the last 17 years? He achieved so much more. He grew so much more. He created the nation. He gave them all that they, everything that happened up until Mitzrayim. From Mitzrayim, that was the last 17 years where Yaakov kicks back his legs, sits back and says, okay, now it's time just to relax. So therefore, says Rav Hirsch, on a personal level, it might be an amazing time for Yaakov, but on a national level, this wasn't a wonderful time. And so therefore, the Torah wants to tell us, Vayechi Yaakov, it puts it right next to the Parasha next to it. We don't give you this big space because we say, as far as we as a nation are concerned, looking at this event, it might be nice for Yaakov, but it wasn't a great time for us as a nation. And therefore, we don't make a big fuss of the fact that Yaakov Avinu lived these 17 years in tranquility, quietly, serenely. That was not a big deal to us. Okay? That is the first thing that I want to speak about. Okay, we move on to another point. This is a very, very important point. Again, made by Rav Hirsch. Rav Hirsch, as I always find that Rav Hirsch has tremendous things to say on the Parasha. And what Rav Hirsch says, he asks Yaakov Avinu asks Yosef the following. If you want to look it up, we're on chapter 47, verse 29. Vayikrevu Yemei Yisrael, almost the days of Yaakov came close to passing away. Vayikra livno leYosef, he called the son Yosef, Vayomer, and he said to him, if I find favor in your eyes, Simna yodcha tachas yirechi, take your hand and put it underneath my thigh, to swear, Ve'osisa imadi chesed ve'emes, and you should do with me chesed, kindness, and emes, and truth, al nafsik bereini b'mitzrayim, please do not bury me in Egypt. Says Rav Hirsch, and this is an important point. I don't know if we spoke about this. I don't know if I spoke about this in the shir here, or if I spoke about this in a shir that I gave in German before I gave this shir, because we had a different shirim. Did we speak about the opposing nature of chesed and emes? I don't think we did.
We did actually talk about this.
We did talk about it a little bit, yes?
Yes.
I do remember we spoke about it a little bit. I didn't remember if we spoke about it in both shirim. So let's just remind ourselves of that. And this is where he says something very interesting. Chesed means what? Kindness. Emes is truth. Kindness and truth often oppose each other. So if I say to you, can you do me a favor? What am I asking you for? Pardon? Something too?
Difficult.
Even if it's not something difficult, but I'm asking you something that I might not deserve of you. Right? That's why I'm calling it a favor. Yeah? Meaning if I lend you £1,000 and I ask you for my £1,000 back, is that asking you a favor?
No.
I hope not. Right? For some people it is asking a favor. For some people, you'll learn next time not to lend this fellow money. Yeah? But in general, if I've lent you £1,000, halavai, if I lend you, pardon?
You can try if you want.
I cannot lend anybody £1,000. Trust me, that's not one of those things that I have. I find it hard to try that. If I lend you £1,000 for whatever reason, and then I ask you for the money back, am I asking you for a favor? Am I asking you for a chesed? Hardly would anybody consider that a chesed. Oh, could you do me a favor? Could you pay me back the money? Favor? No. You owe me the money. The date for paying me the money was whenever it might have been. Pay up. Yeah. If I'm asking you for a chesed, I'm asking you to go above and beyond the letter of the law. Please do me a tova anyway. That's chesed. Emes is the opposite. What we said is to do truth. And we said oftentimes chesed and emes are, I don't want to say they're mutually exclusive, but they are opposites. Because if I'm asking you for emes, if I'm asking you to do something which is truthful, then I'm asking you for something that I feel I have the right to ask you to do. If I'm asking you for chesed, for kindness, then I'm asking you to go above and beyond. Right? So that's the chesed and emes. There's the paradox sometimes of chesed and emes, of doing the right thing on the one hand and going above the letter of the law on the other hand. Sometimes they oppose each other. They don't have to oppose each other, but very often they will be two different concepts. One is asking for more than I deserve, and one is just asking to give me what I deserve. Says Rav Hirsch, Yaakov, I find this idea very, very profound, and that's the following. Sometimes we are so busy in doing chesed that we forget to do emes. Let me explain what I mean. Yeah, it's a bit strange. It sounds wrong at first, but this is what Yaakov wants to say to Yosef. Do you ever, sometimes you want to do something big for someone, right? So I don't know, it's their 50th, 60th, 80th birthday, whatever birthday it might be. It's their 30th, 40th, 50th anniversary. Whatever, and let's say you're planning something big. You're planning a massive party. Alan, how many years you married already?
Going on for 54.
54, so you've passed 50 already. Okay.
Next year
will be 55.
54.
54 will be next year. Okay, Mitzvah Shem, many, many more. Right? So Alan's past the 50 already. So, but let's play this game. Let's make believe that next year was your 50th. Right? Okay? So Alan's 50th, let's say, was next year. Are you hitting 50 soon? Have you hit 50 already? Pardon?
I've hit it already as well.
You hit it already as well?
Yeah.
Wow, Kinana, you as well?
Same as Alan.
Yeah.
Same as Alan.
Yes.
Wow. Amazing.
You've got an whole crowd here.
Yeah, I'm hitting 15, so it was like laughing. You're a long way to go, my friend. Yeah? Right? I got 40 years behind you, Alan.
Don't blink. That's all I can say.
I hear you. Says, so let's say Alan comes to Marlene and he says to Marlene, next year's our 50th. I want to make a special party for you. She goes, no, Alan, you know what? I don't need a big party. No, we're going to make a big party, and we're going to have Vivian and Howard, and we're going to have Ian, and we're going to have all the kids and the grandchildren and everybody around, and we'll invite friends, and we'll get it catered. And she says, you know what? I prefer something quiet, just you and I. And Alan says, no, we're going to make this the party of all parties. And in Alan's sheer excitement to create an amazing party, for Marlene and for him for their 50th anniversary, what did you seemingly forget? What Marlene wants. Yeah. She doesn't want a party. She doesn't want the friends, and she doesn't want the balloons, and she doesn't want the caterer, and she doesn't want the mess in her house, and she doesn't want any of it. Right? But you've gotten so excited and so involved in this idea of making this. I'm just making this up now. Don't get annoyed at me over here. But you've gotten so involved in this idea of creating this party that you've forgotten what the point is. What's the point of the entire exercise? Let's remind ourselves over here. What is the point of the entire exercise that Alan's trying to do? What are we trying to do?
Celebrate the two of them.
Celebrate the two of them. What's the best way to celebrate the two of you? The way you and your wife want together, not what you think is a good idea.
To do what your wife wants.
And even better is to do what your wife wants. True.
Definitely married well over 50 years.
Yes, definitely married well over 50. He's learned the hard way, much experience. But, you know what I mean? That's the, sorry, I didn't mean that. But yeah. Sometimes in our pursuit of chesed, in our pursuit of kindness, in our pursuit of, wow, look what I want to do for you, how great it's going to be, etc., what do we forget? We forget the emes, the truth, the point that's important over here. It's not important to create a party. That's not what it's all about. It's important to celebrate the two of you. And if for whatever reason Marlene doesn't want that party, then to push the party through anyway is missing the boat. She says, but I've done this all for you. You might turn around and say, but this is all for you. All the money I spent, all the effort and all the time it went in there was only for you. And what's she going to say? But I didn't want it. And I told you I didn't want it. So what'd you put all the effort in for me for if I didn't want this? It's not really for me. Can't really describe it as effort for me if that's not what I wanted. Says Yosef, says Yaakov Avinu to Yosef. Yosef, I know you're the king. I know you're the emperor. I know you're going to try your hardest to give me a burial of a king, to give me a burial worthy for more than a king, to give me something to create this amazing, fantastic, whatever it might be that you're going to do for me when I die. But he says, Al nosik bereinu b'Mitzrayim. In all your haste, in all your trying to make sure that you give me the proper kavod, don't forget the most important thing. The emes. I prefer to get no kavod whatsoever and to be buried in Israel than for you to create a national week, year, month of mourning and for whatever reason I remain here in Egypt. That's just not worthwhile. That's not what I want. So you say, but Dad, I've given you all this kavod. I've given you, you know what I've done for you. You know how everybody mourned you. You know how everybody thought of you, and then the hespedim that we made, and we had public broadcasts, and we had a funeral that was seen by 3 billion people on live on television, and he says, but are you asking me what I want? Or are you making it up as you go along? It's very important. That's so important in this instance. Says Yaakov Avinu to Yosef, don't get carried away. Here's a chair, please. Come have a seat. Don't get carried away and just make it up as you go along and think that you're doing me a favor by doing all this chesed and by leaving out the most important thing, the emes. I want to be buried in Egypt. That is the most important thing. The top level on the agenda. Yeah. We'll pass it around. There you go. No problem. Yeah, that's the most important thing on the agenda. Everything else is secondary. And if you end up stressing the chesed too much, you end up making this big party, but you forget to bring me to Eretz Yisrael, you've missed the boat entirely. As in the instance that we said, but in your case, right? If you make this big party, but that's not what somebody wanted, then even if you've spent thousands, tens of thousands of pounds on this party, your wife will say, but I never asked for that. You're not done this for me because that's not what I wanted. Say, but I wanted to be nice to you. Being nice to me is doing what I want, not what you think is nice to me. So it's very important. This chesed and emes. And he says another thing, Rav Hirsch, a very important point, and a two-pronged point that he says about leaving Egypt. He says, imagine now, he had to make Yosef. He says, why does he make Yosef swear to take him out of Egypt? But he didn't think Yosef would listen. So I said, Yosef was in a tremendous predicament. And he says two things. One is for the predicament, and the other one is to make a point. And let's discuss both of them. Number one, Yosef is in a predicament. Yosef is the viceroy of Egypt. And his family has moved down 2 years into this famine and have been given a place to live and have been given food and have been given relative tranquility. And they're now living quite comfortably on the treasury's cheshbon. Okay, so you might turn around and say, well, Yaakov came and it made the famine go away, so it was a big blessing, whatever. But the bottom line is that the family of Yosef is living very nicely, thank you very much, off the taxpayers' pounds or dollars, whatever you want to call it, or whatever they used in those days. Yeah, the taxpayer had a hefty bill. This was a big family, and the family kept on growing. There were 70 people, 70 when they came down, and they didn't do anything. They're getting tax credits. What are they getting tax credits for? I'm working hard, I'm paying my taxes, and it goes to some fellow that's sitting in the pub and drinking beer. Yeah? I'm sure there could have been plenty of people. I'm sorry, that's, again, it's a gross overstatement, and it's not true. However, there are plenty of people that have that kind of feeling. Yeah? There are people that feel very, very upset about this whole thing. Why are people getting tax credits for not working? That doesn't make any sense to them, right? So here's a whole family, they're not working. They came to Egypt. You know what Yosef says to them? This is unbelievable. Yosef says, when you meet up with Pharaoh and Pharaoh says to you, what do? You know what you should say? We're shepherds, because the Egyptians don't like shepherds. And when you say we're shepherds, they'll all go, ooh, keep away. That's basically what he told them. He told them, tell them the thing that they're going to want to hear least. So you're really, really unpopular, that you just go to Goshen. Keep out of here. Go away. And that's what they do. They stand in front of Pharaoh and he says, what do? We are shepherds. Ooh, stay in Goshen. Goodbye. And so this whole family lives in Goshen now, being supported by the treasury for 17 years. And now the patriarch of the family dies. And now the patriarch of the family dies and says, my dear friends, I would like to be buried where? Not in Alexandria, and not in Cairo, and not anywhere along the Fertile Crescent. Rather, bring me back to Israel. Can you imagine the embarrassment? Can you imagine the political upheaval that could have caused in Egypt? Yeah? Imagine, let's go back to, let's who was it? Ed Miliband, David Miliband, whoever it was that almost made it into that. Well, they never really had stood a chance. But, let's say either Ed or David Miliband made it into power. Right? Now, they were Ed Miliband, okay, very secular. I mean, I'm not sure. Were they Jewish? Or were they Jewish. Yeah? Even though we had the famous bacon incident. But forgetting about the famous bacon incident, which is a big chilul Hashem.
They did pull a face.
Pardon?
They did pull a face.
No.
Yeah, it looked terrible.
His wife's not Jewish.
His wife, whose wife?
Ed Miliband's wife.
Oh, yeah, whatever. But imagine if Ed Miliband had become prime minister. Yeah, let's just imagine. We're playing an imagination game. We've already said Alan's making a 50th anniversary party. Now Ed Miliband has become prime minister. We've been very imaginative in today's share. Has been prime minister, etc., etc. And at the end of his reign of prime minister, he passes away, and they're going to inter him, and they say, well, we're going to bring him to Westminster Abbey or wherever they want to bring the prime minister. And he says, no. I've always wanted to be buried in Jerusalem. Remember those? Jerusalem.
Yeah, the capital of Israel.
Yeah, no. Don't say that. That's very political. Ridiculous thing that you can't call Jerusalem the capital of Israel. I mean, it's just... it's beyond ridiculous. It really is. But let's say he says, I want to be buried in Jerusalem. And now Ed Miliband wants to be buried in Jerusalem. And everybody says, this is the guy that ate bacon in public. This is the guy that was the prime minister of this country, of Great Britain. Now, when it comes to it, where does he want to be buried? In Israel, like a Jew. Once a Jew, always a Jew. They're not faithful to our country. These people don't really want to be here. Dual loyalty. I'm sure we've heard all this before, right? These are not new sentiments. Says Rav Hirsch, could you imagine? Yaakov says, after everything that has been done over there, he has been a celebrity of sorts because he's the one that brought the famine to its end. And he's been living in Egypt, and he's been taking money from the treasury in Egypt, and now he dies and they bring him to Israel. Can you imagine the political fiasco? Can you imagine the headlines in the Mirror and in the Telegraph, etc., etc.? I'm sure the Mirror would have been very, very unflattering about that kind of story. They wouldn't have written a very nice headline. Neither would have any of the other papers. How dare he? Where is his gratitude to our country? Yeah? And his son is the viceroy. And his son has been skimming money off the treasury constantly to be able to feed his entire family. For them to what? When he dies, to go to Israel? That's what he did it for. So it could have been a real political hoo-ha. Says Yaakov, Yosef, I understand you might be put into a very, very difficult predicament. I want you to swear to me that you will do as I told you and take me to Israel anyway. As difficult and as uncomfortable as it's going to be, as politically fraught as going to be, as you will end up in some kind of very, very uncomfortable situation, I don't care. I would like you to take me and I would like you to bury me in Israel. It's a very, very strong point. But secondly, and this is also a very important point to be made, says Rav Hirsch, Yaakov is making a point to his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They're living a very comfortable life. Things were amazing at that point in Egypt. Yes, they got worse as it went on. But at that point, it was a utopian life. You sat back, you were supported by the treasury, you didn't have to do any work, you lived in Meitav Haaretz Be'eretz Ramses. They lived in the best part of Mitzrayim in Egypt. It was fertile, it was beautiful, they had pasture for their sheep. It was just amazing, amazing. And you might think to yourself at one point or another, you know what? Egypt's not so bad. Maybe we should stay here. Maybe this is a great place to remain. Who says we got to move out of here? Who says this was a bad place? Whoever told us that this was not the kind of place that a Jew could flourish? Jews could flourish here very, very well. Thank you very much. Says Yaakov Avinu, you want to live here. I don't even want to be buried here. That's how little I want to have to do with Egypt. Remember, always remember, this is not your home. This is where you live temporarily, but this is not where you want to stay permanently. And so Yaakov Avinu says, I need to make this point. I want my children and my grandchildren to know, always to say to themselves, where did our forefather Yaakov, where was he buried? He was buried in Israel, because he wasn't willing to remain in this land of Egypt 1 second longer than he had to. If he could, he would leave right away. He couldn't. God decreed that all of us had to be down there. But as soon as he died, Yaakov says, I'm dead, I'm out. Take me out of here. And let my children and my grandchildren remember this for posterity. This is not our land. This might be where we're living temporarily. This might be the exile that God has sent us to. But it should never become that we become complacent enough, that we feel at home enough to say, this is our home. Never should a Jew feel his home is England or America or Europe or Africa or Asia or anywhere else. We have one home, only one home, and that home is Israel.
Those people used to say Berlin is the new Jerusalem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting because the Meshech Chochmah, Reb Meir Simcha of Dvinsk, wrote a commentary in the early 1900s, well before Nazi Germany ever existed. He says, Hoyle Omrim, woe is to those that say Berlin is Jerusalem. They will still live to regret it. And no, boy, was he right. Yeah? And look, that doesn't mean we can't live in tranquility where we are. Of course we can live in tranquility where we are. But always remember, we are only guests here. This is not our country. As comfortable as we feel here, we often get very uncomfortable reminders that this is not really our country. This is not really where we belong. And if we get too comfortable over here, who reminds us that it's not our country?
Everybody else.
Everybody else. The population. Sometimes the strange thing is, it could be people that have moved here themselves. And you think to yourself, you're a minority. Who are you to tell me that this is not my country? Well, it's not your country either. You're Asian, or you're African, or wherever they might come from. So what right do you have to tell me that I don't belong here? Well, I belong here just as much as you do. And if I don't belong here, why do you belong here? But sometimes it's a reminder from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God reminds us and says, don't ever feel this is your home. This is where you live, and at the moment is a very comfortable place to live. Don't get me wrong. Baruch Hashem, we live in a Medina of Chesed. We live in a country that's a democracy, and in a country that is very positively, disposed towards us. But we still have BDS to contend with, and there's overt anti-Semitism and covert anti-Semitism that is cloaked as anti-Zionism or anti-Israel or whatever else it might be.
You got Corbyn.
And we got Corbyn, who will tell you that he's never been an anti-Semite and he loves all Jews, etc., etc. And we all know, deep down, it's not easy. It's not as simple as we think it is. And Yaakov is reminding everybody, and he's saying to everybody, don't ever forget, we don't really belong here. We are here on a journey, and we can make the most of that journey. And maybe we can have a very good time on this journey. But deep down we have to know, says Yaakov, I am not willing to stay here. And I'm making you, Yosef, swear to me, you will take me out of this country and you will bury me somewhere else, because I know I don't belong here, and I want my children and grandchildren to know for posterity, we don't belong anywhere else other than Eretz Yisrael. We might live temporarily in other places other than Israel. But where we belong, that's only our country. That's only our eternal Eretz Yisrael. And so Yaakov makes this point. He says, I'm making you swear, it's going to be difficult, and everyone's going to say the Jews don't have loyalty to this country, etc., etc. But I want my children and my grandchildren to know forever, this is not our country. This is not where we live. This is not where we belong. We belong in Israel. Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
I was looking at Arut Sheva.
Yes, please.
The Caliber Rebbe gave Trump a blessing for making Jerusalem the capital.
It's interesting. Look, he deserves. Some people are very, very excited about it. Some people are very, very upset about it because it's not done anything. It's created a tremendous amount of animosity, etc., etc. I saw a very cute comic, and with this we could finish. There was a comic that I saw that said, in response to this announcement, we are now announcing 3 days of rage. To which the fellow saying next to him says, and how's that different than any other day? Right? Yeah. Be that as it may, gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you to anybody who joined us on live, and thank you to anybody who joined us in person. Please join us again next week.